Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Rays podcast. And Ulises, today we are pleased to be joined by Aram Leighton, host of the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast and the creator of what I will say is an excellent baseball website, justbaseball.com. Again, justbaseball.com. It's always fun when we have Aram on the show to talk a little baseball.
It is. And it has been so long that the last time we had him on, Wander Franco was in the minor leagues, Kevin.
Crazy.
Oh. So I'm just going to go out here and just throw you a fastball down the middle, Aram. What did you think about the Wander Franco signing before this lockout started?
So I thought you were going to say, what do you think of Wander Franco? I was going to say he's pretty good. Just leave it at that, right? That's the analysis I get to give you.
No bleep, he's pretty good.
He's pretty decent. It's so funny how quickly things happen, right? I mean, we always knew what he was capable of, but things don't always go the way we think they will. I would say he's as safe as it gets, and we kind of saw why. I love the signing. I think it's rare. It's something that I think we're going to see a lot more of from small market teams, and I love that the Rays. It's unfortunate that it took like a actual generational freak to push them to do it, but I'm glad that the Rays kind of jumped out of the comfort zone a little bit and committed this money, because realistically they're going to get, I mean, an unreal amount of value out of it, assuming everything goes right health-wise for Wander and everything continues the way it is. There's no denying the ability at this point. I love the signing. I want small market teams to keep their stars, and this is a great way for them to do it affordably still. Because there's really no excuse, no matter how small market you are, every team is capable of doing this, from the Rays to the Marlins and everyone in between. And I think the Rays are kind of showing that you're capable of it. It just took a Wander Franco to get people to do it. But I'm so thrilled about it. I really am.
Now, on social media, or as Kevin likes to call it, anti-social media, there was a lot of, oh my God, is he crazy? He could have gotten so much more. Why is he leaving money on the table? And then the other spectrum, which I think me and Kevin are in, is like, look, man, tomorrow you can fall off a flight of stairs and you can never play baseball again. So absolutely, in that spectrum, where are you? Is this a win-win for both of these parties?
100%. 100%. I mean, look, could Wander Franco have waited out a couple years and eked out some more money? Sure. But that's what the Rays were leveraging here, right? I mean, this is what business is. It's all about leveraging your edge and the other side leveraging their edge and finding a common ground. And that's exactly what this deal is. It's still a substantial amount of money. I mean, a ridiculous amount of money that will, if used properly, will provide generational wealth well beyond Wander Franco's longest years if he lives to 90, right? So that's the thing, is we get caught up in the numbers like it's a Monopoly game, but it's up to $223 million for a player who ultimately has not even played 100 games at the major league level. He's special. He might end up being one of the best to ever do it. Like, that's not even crazy to say. But you have to take the bird in hand right now. Things are set in. I hate to bring up an unfortunate example, but look at Jose Fernandez, right? Jose Fernandez was on pace to make so much money it would have been dumb, and unfortunately his family's left behind without much to show for it, to the point where the former Marlins owners and president David Sampson and Jeffrey Loria offered to cover Jose's daughter's schooling as she grows up. That is the kind of thing that, like you said, snap of a finger, everything changes, and now he just secured just steadiness and safety for his family and the financial department. But when it comes to just breaking down the contract in general, I mean, look at some of the other deals across baseball. Look at what Ronald Acuna signed up for. Not nearly, I think, what Wander Franco is going to be getting out of this deal. The White Sox did it with several different guys as well, from Robert to Eloy Jimenez. I think this is a perfect deal for both sides, and it's going to be an awesome career, I think, with the Rays. And I'm hoping, they hold on to him for the duration of that contract.
Yeah, people forget that it literally is a record-setting deal for a player his age and a player who's played as few games in the majors as he has. And let's also consider compare what Wander Franco, the bag he now has, to what guys like Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Corey Seager have yet to make. Now they're going to get paid or are set. I've already inked contracts, but it took 5-6 years in the pre-ARB game and making minimum salaries. They didn't really cash in as much as Wander is going to over the course of this first contract of his. I do want to get your take, Aram, on this. So what do you see as maybe a typical stat line for Wander Franco when he hits his prime? Like, do you look at him as a legit MVP caliber player for, pretty much year in, year out as he hits his mid-20s?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. I mean, it was just ridiculous watching him play this year, especially in Boston for whatever reason. I would always tune into those games, and he seemed to just love playing in those tougher environments on the road, wherever it would be. But I mean, we watched him early on. He had a little bit of that feeling it out process, and then it just stretched and into the postseason. I think you can really count on what we saw, more power as he gets more comfortable. He's got that kind of ability that I think he's going to put up Jose Ramirez type numbers, but with a higher batting average, maybe slightly less in the power department. But I think, you're looking at a perennial MVP candidate as long as he's healthy. Because what really stood out to me, and the only thing that I wasn't able to see a ton of prior to his call-up, was the defense. I knew that he had no problem sticking it short. I knew that he'd be fine there, but he's a lot better than I thought he would be. He made some rookie errors here and there. He's playing shortstop on the biggest stage as a 20-year-old. I was really impressed at the range, the arm strength, how smooth his actions were. He's going to be an above-average shortstop. I wouldn't be surprised if he won Gold Gloves as well. So when you factor that in, I mean, how isn't this guy potentially one of the best players in baseball? He's really got it all. The only question I have is it going to be more 25 to 30 home runs, or is it going to be more 35 to 40 home runs? And that's more just dependent on what he wants to do. Whether he wants to be more of that line drive guy, gap to gap, and go for a little bit extra in the hitter's counts, or if he wants to try to be more of that power guy. I think he's going to be somewhere between the two, and with the bat to ball skills he has and the glove he provides and the speed as well. Yeah, I mean, this is an MVP candidate, I think, year in and year out.
Okay, career WAR prediction for Wander Franco. I need a number.
This is a flip on what we actually do on Fridays. We call it we do a game called Name That WAR,
right?
Where we take a retired player and we have to name his WAR. Now he's flipping it on you, Aram. So like, what do you think? That's crazy.
Ooh, name that WAR on. It's funny because you look at like an Adrian Beltre, and Adrian Beltre played for 21 years, and he accumulated a 93 WAR. Assuming that Wander, I mean, careers are just not going that long as much anymore, and Wander's now up at 20 years old. But assuming Wander gives us like 18 seasons, I don't see how if I'm saying he's going to be all these things, I got to back it up, right? Like, I don't see how he's not an 80 WAR guy plus when it's all said and done. 80, 90 WAR. Like that would put him in the top 30 all time, which is so crazy to say. Yeah. But I really think he's that insane. Like, I really think he's that insane. So I'm going to go final answer. I'll give him 85 WAR, which would put him right with Chipper Jones, right in that range. But I wouldn't even be surprised if he beat that.
I think we'll take that, Kevin.
Yeah.
I think we'll take that to the bank and store that in the vault, because that's
okay with you guys?
Yes,
that's all right.
That'll play. That'll play.
I think he's going to be a future Hall of Famer if all goes well. Like, I watch him during the regular season at 20 years old, and he already looks like, and was in some ways, the most complete, most advanced hitter on the Rays roster.
Kevin put it this way. When you are looking at his at-bats, you're watching the game, but his at-bats, the walks are a pleasure to watch. The way that his plate discipline, it's just unreal how he just is above and beyond the competition right now with the discipline at the plate.
Yeah,
it's wild to see it translate to at the big league level, like rather quickly, just not even blinking. And that's the craziest thing to me. Is the guy hit every pitch, right? Like, he crushed fastballs, he crushed breaking balls, Changeups gave him a little bit of fit, but they give everybody fits. It's the hardest pitch to hit in baseball. And he still was like, okay, he still held his own. That considered, it's like, how do you beat him? What's your scouting report? How are you trying to get Wander Franco out? Are you going to throw 10 changeups in a row? I just don't know how you beat that guy. And I don't think anybody knows how, because they haven't. And we saw that firsthand in the postseason. I think he's only going to get better and better in that regard too. I mean, any little hole he has in his game, I have all the confidence that he'll sort that out. And again, I think that the glove is a really underrated aspect. I can't emphasize enough how impressed I was with the glove compared to, where I thought he might be. I mean, the bat, this is what we thought, right? This is anything that he could possibly attain was within the realm of possibility for us. But the glove, I mean, it's further along than I thought.
I let's focus on the flaws then, because from where I stand, yes, I agree with you. The defense was better than advertised, but you see where it could get better. And number two, the splits. I mean, he was just a way better hitter as a right-hander than as a lefty. Now, are those the two biggest obstacles that he needs to show up next year? Is improve that defense, improve the numbers on the left-hand side of the plate, or do you think there's something else?
No, I think that's the biggest thing, man, because this is a big pet peeve of mine. I was by no means a superstar, but playing through high school, I was a switch hitter, and my right-handed swing was way worse than my left-handed swing. But my right hand, I was comfortable enough from the right side that it was worth it to not hit left on left, right? We know what left on left does to hitters most of the time. Right. When it's the other way around, it gets a little bit puzzling. Obviously, we need more of a sample size here in minor leagues, and the track record point towards him being fine from both sides. It just seems like big league pitching is giving him a little bit more of a fit, from that left side, which I thought was very fascinating. That is a concern because you hit way more from the left side, right? 2/3 of your at-bats are going to be from the left side. It's one of the things that drives me crazy about Ozzie Albies is he is so much better, from that side of the plate that he hits less from. He's so much better from the right side, and you're hurting yourself by only hitting from your better side a third of the time. I'm not worried about that with Wander. I don't think he needs to scrap the switch hitting, but I do think it's a great point, right? Like, what was wrong with the right-handed swing, or what was wrong with the right-handed approach? And I think you might have just inspired me. I'm literally writing it down right now for one of my next pieces, because you know what? We're desperate for content. We've been doing a lot of Hall of Fame stuff. I know we're going to talk about that. I've been doing a ton of prospect write-ups and system write-ups, but I want to mix in some big league stuff. I'm going to take a dive into the two swings and approaches between Wander from the left and right side, because I think it's definitely something he needs to work on. It seemed like velo, from, if I remember correctly, and I'm looking at even those stats, velo seemed to get to him a little bit from the right side. From the left side, excuse me. Only a 670 OPS from that left side against fastballs. And that sometimes happens with guys who are right-handed throwers and left-handed hitters. Sometimes they just struggle to get on top of the ball. They lose the barrel a little bit. That was something that I had going on too. I still liked my left-handed swing better, but that was something that I had going on a little bit too. It might just be something as simple as just getting that top hand more involved and a little bit more of a conscious thought, because what's the one thing that they do the most in the big leagues compared to the minor leagues? It's high spin fastballs elevated all the time. And I think that might be a little bit of the challenge for him up there, but I will do a dive into that. The defense, I think it was just more rookie action stuff, just being clean, being smooth, just getting yourself in the right spot. The ball's coming at you a lot harder. It's a different game at the big league level. And I think he got a little sped up sometimes. But I thought as we saw him go on, I know he made that one big error in the postseason, but it seemed like the game really slowed down for him at shortstop. And what I was most impressed by is just the flashes that we saw. I'm like, this guy has the tools to be a plus defender there. So if those are your two big issues, then as a hitter, or as a player, you're in great shape.
Yeah, it's funny because as the year went on with Wander, not only did he get more comfortable at the plate, but defensively with the glove, he did as well. I remember earlier on in the season, there were some, that doesn't look good. Like he had a ball or two ricochet off his glove and hit him in the face. It looked painful. Some instances like that, and how he backhanded, and maybe the mechanics and fundamentals weren't always there. But I do want to ask you, not to make this a Wander Franco podcast episode, but I think this is the last question on Wander for now, for a little bit anyway. So I assume you're under the impression that he's going to stay at short for the long term, because that's been sort of a question mark with him. Of he is a little bit of a bulkier guy, and maybe as he gets a little bit older, he has to shift to a corner infield spot like third base. And the Rays also have a very, very talented defender within their system in Taylor Walls. So is it something where you see, okay, Wander is the franchise player, his value is best just sticking him at short, and then Taylor Walls takes on the Joey Wendell-like role of, okay, he can play some third, he can fill in at short in a pinch. If he needs to play second one day, he can do that as a switch hitter that provides some versatility as well. How do you see that shaking out with the Rays?
I think that's a phenomenal question, because it's something that is interesting right now when I'm looking at the Royals, right? And the Royals are talking about getting Bobby Witt some run at third because of how good defensively Nicky Lopez was last year. And to that, I was like, no, don't do that, right? Like, Bobby Witt's going to be your franchise cornerstone, hopefully similar to Wander for the next decade plus, and they might make a similar offer to him if he shows enough at the big league level. Why would you move him to third? I would say Bobby Witt's a bit more advanced defensively already. He's super polished there, so it's a little bit different. But when I look at Wander, I was really impressed with that ability, and I think he has more than enough capability to stick it short, because I was going into the year a little bit concerned about whether he would even be able to stick there consistently. I think he's proven that he can develop into a guy that can stick there. But it's an interesting spot because you now have, to me, I think is one of the most incredible defensive wizards in Taylor Walls at short, and you can maximize the value there. Does it make that much of a difference to put Wander at third? Maybe not. I mean, what really stood out to me with Wander was the arm, and I think he could probably be an even better defender at third with that arm. But I guess it kind of goes down to what the Rays' philosophy is, right? Because do you want to keep this franchise cornerstone at shortstop and just have him there and have him continue to develop at that spot? Or do you move him to third? I don't think it really affects his impact on the ball club if he's playing third and you got a better defensive shortstop. And I kind of turn the question back on you guys. Like, who would be the guy that would stick at third moving forward if Wander is playing shortstop, right? Walls will be moving all over. Who's playing third?
Well, you know what? Right now you've got a guy like Yandy who could step in, and then they can do Yandy Walls, righty-lefty situation. But really, I don't see how you give a guy $200+ million and then the next season go, you know what? I don't think you can cut a kid for a shortstop. I think the work ethic, the all of the dedication that Wander has shown the Rays organization, yes, he might have looked a little bit, young for the position at times.
He's 20.
But he's 20, and I think he's shown enough that he can get better, and I think he's going to stay at short.
Yeah.
I think if we're like purely looking at eking out the most value in terms of your team across the board defensively, probably makes sense to have one of the best defensive shortstops in the minor leagues, and even I think already one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball in Taylor Walls there, and Wander would probably provide even more defensive value at third.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about just your franchise cornerstone who, like you said, you just locked up for a decade, just maturing in what is the spot that every kid growing up wants to play, and it's like that superstar position at shortstop, and kind of growing into that face of the league potentially type of guy there, like Fernando Tatis is, who is by far a worse defender than Wander will ever be. But they haven't moved him from there except when they had to because of injury. So I think that kind of speaks volumes there too, right? I mean, it's a different team. Padres, much different philosophy from the Rays. And I could see the Rays saying, hey, we're trying to win ball games, and this is the best chance to win ball games. But Wander isn't enough of an issue for me there to do that. If he was Tatis-esque, I'd say, yeah, move him to third because you have Taylor Walls, and the Padres don't have a Taylor Walls. Abrams is coming up, but it's not like he's this wizard at shortstop. So, yeah, it's interesting. But I think, given what it represents and just kind of the optics of it, I wonder if it just makes more sense to keep him at short, though I would not be upset with a move to third given what the Rays have going on and all the middle infielders they have through their system that wouldn't really be good at third base, right? Like, you're not putting an Xavier Edwards at third base. He's hit one home run in 1,000 plate appearances. That's a guy that plays second base or shortstop in a pinch. So with all those middle infielders, it will be interesting to kind of see how it all shakes out because Wander is built for third too. He would be great there.
Ulises, it's kind of funny because the defensive value that Taylor Walls and his seemingly being ready for the show maybe made it easier for the Rays to stomach letting go or trading Joey Wendell to a team that Aram knows very well, the Miami Marlins.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We had talked about Joey Wendell might have been at his highest value ever after the All-Star nomination, after the Gold Glove nomination. We have always been Joey Wendell fans in this podcast. Kevin can attest to that. Now, you from the other side, how were you with the news that Joey Wendell had just been traded for Kameron Meisner? Was it a win-win from the Marlins perspective? What's your take?
It's tough because I look at the addition of Joey Wendell in a vacuum, and I love it, right? You have a team in the Marlins that, one, has a lot of help. They need a lot of help offensively. And Wendell's not going to light the world on fire, but he can swing it enough to be a guy that you can put in the lineup day in and day out, and he's going to put the bat on the ball, and he's going to be pretty consistent. And when he's going right, he was an all-star in the first half for a reason. He went through some struggles, but this is a proven bat that is high floor. But the most important thing, I think, from the Marlins standpoint is they're two of their most injury-prone players besides Garrett Cooper, who's perpetually injured, unfortunately, and actually can swing it if he's healthy. Brian Anderson at third base and Jazz Chisholm at second base were hurt a lot last year, and for the first time, Miguel Rojas looked a little bit vulnerable. So you've got your three infield positions there with guys that you got to probably account for them missing some time. The problem last year was that the Marlins were replacing those guys or replacing those at-bats with Joe Panic and Isan Diaz, who combined for -3 FWAR. Now you're finding Joey Wendell in there, who is a positive WAR player and then some. I love it from that standpoint. Giving up Kameron Meisner, I'm a big proponent of where the Marlins are at now. I try to emphasize to the fans, like, hey, you cannot be hugging prospects at this point. The Marlins need to have some urgency. I'm not saying win the World Series tomorrow, but they need to do something that shows fans that they're trying to win. Joey Wendell's probably not going to pack the stadium, but this is the beginning of building out that team. I don't think they're done. Craig Mish, who's always on it with the Marlins and reporting and breaking every trade, says they're only about 50% done. So I like the deal. I just would like to have seen the Marlins trade from their pitching surplus rather than their outfielders, which, they need bats. And Kameron Meisner has as much upside as anybody. But let's be real. The Rays know what they're doing when they target prospects, and they targeted Kameron Meisner for a reason. And I think this was the only way that the Marlins didn't have to give up multiple pitching prospects, was to give up Kameron Meisner. Meisner is a really exciting prospect. Finished the year outrageously well after a slow start. He's tooled up. He's got crazy raw power. He's a plus runner. He's a big dude. Also a very nice guy that, I think will fit in really well. And yes, he's a little bit risky. There's some swing and miss there, but the Rays see something they like, and I think they're right to have seen that. I wasn't surprised that they targeted Kameron Meisner, to be honest.
You talk about, he's got pop. He's got good speed, plays the outfield. Now, the strikeout number is a little bit high, and he just was promoted to AA, almost at 30%. Where is he on the trajectory? I know we spoke off camera when this happened, and I wanted to joke with you. Is he the next Josh Lowe? How close is that of a comp for Kameron Meisner?
I don't think it's far off at all. I think Lowe's one of I'm outrageously high on Lowe. I think he is somebody that's a little bit, just more dynamic in that regard. Like I'm taking Lowe's defense and center a bit more. I'm taking his bat to ball skills a bit more. But there was a tangible adjustment for Meisner, and it was as simple as just his loading mechanism for his timing. He just was struggling to be on time, and he came up with a little bit more of just a consistent mechanism in his load, like he was saying, and a little bit more of a consistent thought to get to the same spot. And he felt like he was on time a lot easier and a lot more frequently. And we saw the results. They continued to just show. That's a big jump from high A to AA, and to perform better after that jump, I think kind of shows you how that adjustment helped him. The glove is good, really good. In the corner, I think it's plus. In a center, I think it can be average to above average, whereas Lowe could be plus in center. So that's the difference. But I think there's there's a very large similarity here. These are big dudes with big power, great athleticism. And again, that's kind of why I think the Rays targeted him. They saw the similarities too. And this guy has top 100 prospect upside. I think if he performs this year in Double-A, I don't see how you can keep him out of the top 100. If it weren't for a beat up season in college at Missouri and a little bit of a disappointment on the back end there, he would have been early first round pick, and he still ended up being the 35th overall pick by the Marlins. So this is a great pickup for the Rays. And honestly, I didn't love that the Marlins gave him up, but like I said, you got to give to get, and Joey Wendell helps the Marlins now for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because Joey Wendell doesn't bring a lot of flash, but he's just a winning player and does pretty much everything the right way. And he will certainly help out that team and help out that clubhouse and set a positive example. And I think play some, do okay offensively, but I think the defense, the glove is really what helps him at third base among other positions in his versatility. But it is interesting because I know we're not a Marlins podcast, but I do want to get your take, Aram, on what the Marlins have done this offseason, going after Jacob Stallings, signing Avi Garcia. It seems like every time I look at the Marlins roster, there's like a handful of Rays players, former Rays players, or guys that were farmhands within the Rays. I mean, Jesus Sanchez, Avi Garcia, Joey Wendell now, Paul Campbell, Lewis Head. Like the list goes on and on and on. But what do you see? And I'm sure if and when the lockout ends, there might be some more movement there. But what's your, I guess, prediction or expectation for the Marlins in 2022?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was really getting frustrated with some of the front office decisions last year, I'm pretty sure I went through a rant at some point where I was just like, stop trying to be the Rays. You cannot be the Rays. Take bits and pieces of it, but just be the Marlins. Because it just seems so obvious to me that they were just trying to play that Rays baseball, that type of approach. And it's a really hard thing to do. It's a really, really hard thing to do, and that's why everybody marvels at what the Rays are capable of. This was an interesting signing. In a vacuum, I like it in terms of just adding Avi Garcia to your team. I mean, that is positive. But, I mean, you guys kind of saw it firsthand. He had one of his better years. It seems like he's like an every other year kind of guy where he's good, bad. And hopefully that's not the case because that would mean he'd be bad this year. But, I just don't know if I'm on board with giving him the amount of years. I mean, 4 years, $53 million for the Marlins is a pretty substantial amount for a guy who, like, let's face it, has only had one season of an F/WAR above 4. Last year was his best year if you look at the department of like slash line and home runs, and still only 2.9 F/WAR there. The glove is all right. I like it because this is a team that was so offensively challenged that, he's going to help them there, and he's low-key fast and interesting. But the one that really got me more excited, and I might be in the minority in this, is Jacob Stallings, really. I mean, the Marlins could not have been worse off behind the dish. And that was something I tried to emphasize ad nauseum. I'm like, it's malpractice to have rolled out last year with what they had behind the dish. I mean, they had a negative F/WAR from the catching position. They had the lowest WRC plus from the position. Or if you want to just go with traditional stats, pick one. I promise you they were the worst at it. Pass balls, throwing guys out, framing, they were towards the bottom. Batting average, strikeouts, whatever you want. They were terrible. So when you factor that in, and now you're replacing that with a competent hitter and somebody that's unbelievable defensively. He went the whole year without a pass ball. Jorge Alfaro led the league in pass balls in a third of the innings that most of the other guys had back there. I think it's going to change a lot. And also think about it from this component. You're taking a really good pitching staff and now adding one of the best catchers in baseball in terms of calling games, framing, blocking. I just think it's going to, one, help guys like Jesus Luzardo take that next step. And I can't wait to see what stealing a few strikes does for Sandy Alcantara and Trevor Rogers. So I'm really excited about that one. But it sounds like they're not done either. So I'm kind of reserving the judgment until after the lockout, hopefully. And I think they're going to make that one big splash trade with what Craig Mish says is an AL team is who they're talking to. That's all he'll give me. I can speculate Cedric Mullins, maybe Brand Marsh. I don't know. But AL team, outfield bat. That's all he's saying right now.
Ooh,
interesting.
That sounds like Austin Meadows.
Oh.
Is there any chance that would be possible?
I mean, I've been playing on your favorite website of all time, and
well, let's put it this way:
I love that that's like my association.
If there's a Rays player
arms
making
the
more
anti.
than $1 million, the Rays might try to trade that player, no matter how productive he is. I'll throw it out there. Arm, do you buy into my hot take at all? I've thrown out some hot. The Marlins will finish with as good or a better record than the New York Mets, even after hiring Buck Showalter. I will stick with my prediction that the Marlins will finish with a better record than the Mets, the disgraceful, dysfunctional Mets in 2022.
Well, man, I hope you're right. I hope you're right because, even though I don't host Locked On Marlins anymore, by the way, Peter Pratt over there, my favorite buddy from the UK, is killing it. I'm excited to see whenever you guys hopefully link up for a crossover. We were talking about it, and the Mets, they've made every move you could possibly make, right? But I mean, Jacob deGrom, he's the best pitcher in baseball, right? Could be one of the best pitchers ever. But I'm a little bit worried about the health, right? And I think he's going to be okay. I hope that he's okay. But if he falters, right, if he's not able to stay healthy, you also have a Max Scherzer who faded at the end of the year because of how much he was putting on his arm. I'm hoping he comes back fresh next year. But you're leaning on the front end of your rotation with two guys that are on the other side of 30. One's on the back end of 30. And both, either one has some injury issues and the other, is kind of feeling his age at times a little bit. I don't know if you can count on those guys to give you 200 innings in today's game. And you might not need them to, but you lost Marcus Stroman, which I actually think they're going to feel a little bit more than people think. Carlos Carrasco, though, I think is a very low-key X factor for them. A lot of it rides on Lindor, too. I just don't know. Even Buck Showalter, I think the big hiring there was to manage the personalities, right? Yeah. I don't know if he can. I don't know if anybody can. I don't know if Dr. Phil can. And that's the question. So on the Marlins side, look, they need to make another move or two offensively. But assuming they do, I mean, that rotation is outrageous. I mean, Sandy Alcantara, I think, is making his case to be one of the better, top 15 pitchers in baseball as he continues on his trajectory. Trevor Rogers isn't that far behind. And then Pablo Lopez is as good of a 3, I think, as you're going to find. And they've got maybe Sixto Sanchez back in the fold, Max Meyer, Edward Cabrera, Eliezer Hernandez is a solid back end of the rotation option. Jesus Luzardo, if he puts it together, is a freak in the best way possible. Like, the pitching will be fantastic, but how's the offense? Can it hold up? And that's going to be the big question. But what I can tell you is it's going to be a lot better than last year already. So I hope you're right. It's a hot take, but any team with that kind of pitching, I think, has a shot. And I'll ride with it. I'll die on that hill with you, Kevin.
Can I just say this, Ulises, before you take over here? Just because a team wins the offseason does not mean they're going to win the regular season. San Diego Padres.
Ask the Padres.
Yeah. And 2012 Marlins.
There you go.
That too.
Wow, flashback.
Man. And then let me just say this about the Mets and managing some big personalities. I'm low-key, I mean, besides the fact of I'd love to see Matt Quatraro get an opportunity and advance in his career, but I think it might be for the better that he didn't get this job with the Mets as his first managerial job.
Oh, my gosh.
Out there. Yeah.
100%. You don't want to step onto those coals for your first gig. You can be pretty much written off.
Yeah.
And then you never get another opportunity. Talking about the Mets, talking about other teams, the Cubs, Stroman went there. I want to get your barometer on what was the most surprising free agent signing that we saw in that little frenzy for 2 weeks there in November. What was most surprising? Number one, Scherzer to the Mets, Seager to the Rangers, or Robbie Ray to Seattle?
So that's a great question. I was ready for the Mets to just throw money. I was ready for Steve Cohen to leverage that money, and I don't think he's done. I think he's going to continue to leverage that money, whether it's absorbing contracts that nobody wants, like Josh Donaldson or things like that. Mm-hmm. I was probably most surprised. The Mariners, after what they did last year, I figured they'd be drinking the Kool-Aid. Dipoto was ready to be a little bit aggressive. They got Kyle Seager off the books and basically replaced that money with a Robbie Ray. I know the Rangers said they were going to spend, but I really just didn't believe it. I thought they'd go get one dude, maybe Javi Baez, or the kind of deal that he got with the Tigers, and call it a day. I can't believe what they're doing. So I'm gonna go with the Rangers. I mean, they commit $500 million to a couple guys as if they're some close to complete team. That was the most mind-blowing for me. Even though we were hearing about it for a while, I just flat out can't believe it. And it took them paying about 15 to 20 cents more on the dollar to bring him in. And that was also shocking to me. That has to be number one. I still just can't believe that the Rangers are gonna have those two guys next year, and who knows what it's gonna look like.
It's insanity. I 500 million, $500 million, and when you're throwing that much money around, and you're like, okay, well, you've got Seager, shortstop, you got Semien. Oh man, who's at first? And then look, old friend of the program, Nate Lowe. But when you've got Seager and Semien, and then you got Nate Lowe on first base, like there's a drop off there. I mean, you're nowhere near done if you have that much money in the books.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? You're spending all that money. How much can they feasibly spend outside of that? I think this was more like, okay, we missed our opportunity. Unfortunately, having the new stadium in a time where nobody could attend the stadium really up until that World Series. And even that was, not really what the stadium was supposed to be in terms of people being able to go. This was their splash to say, hey, come on down. Like, let's pack this thing and let's make that new move like the Marlins did in 2012 with their new stadium. And that's why I'm interested to see how it all plays out. They're not going to be able, even if Seager is really solid, nobody's going to absorb that contract, similar to the way that nobody wanted to absorb Stanton's contract, even after he had some of the best seasons you're going to see. There's just a degree of only a couple teams can absorb that kind of deal, and that gives them all the leverage in the world. So that's why I think they're in a really interesting spot. I do like the addition of John Gray, but yeah, they've got a lot more work to do. What I do like is that I think third base will be answered internally with Josh Young. I really like him as a prospect, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that kind of rolls right into the big leagues. And that's about it, though. Right? Like, what else are we excited about on this ball club? They are pretty far off, and if Adolis Garcia takes a step back, they're going to struggle. So it's a lot on some guys that aren't that proven outside of the two guys that are proven that are going to get paid $500 million. So I don't totally get it, but I'm cool with it. Like, I'd rather him go there than the Yankees or the Dodgers.
Right.
So, it's better for baseball when those mid-market teams, even though they're technically a larger market, are shelling out the money instead of it being that 1% of the Yankees and the Dodgers and those types of teams.
Aram, I wasn't expecting you to talk this much about the Texas Rangers, but I've got to throw this question out there. You are, of course, the prospect aficionado, among other things. I mean, just baseball aficionado, I should say. But I want to give a little shout out and see if you have any scouting report on insight on this guy, Dustin Harris. He's a graduate of Land O'Lakes High School and St. Petersburg College, and was the 2021 Texas Rangers minor league player of the year. And he was like a mid-round draft pick a couple years ago. I want to say like 12th, 13th round, something like that. I was actually talking with his mother not too long ago. Very excited about the career trajectory that he is on. But what do you see from him and maybe making an impact at some point with the Texas Rangers or elsewhere?
It's funny as you're saying that I've been working on the Ranger system as well, as I'm just continuing to churn out the top prospect list for every team. So just as you were talking about that, went to pull up my notes because I remember writing up Dustin Harris. And the thing so I talk about guys like this a lot because I call it the Ty France effect, meaning that when you are a really good hitting prospect who doesn't have any other tool that jumps off the page, people overlook you because there's just so much pressure on just the ability to hit flat out. But if you look at Ty France going all the way back to the beginning of his professional career and all the way back before that, he has done nothing but hit. Yet nobody really gave him the time of day until he just did it at the big league level consistently. And now we saw what he did last year. I see Dustin Harris being kind of that similar guy of the Ty France effect, right? Like, he stuck at first, most likely, but he also was able to just put up outrageous numbers. I'm very interested to see if he can do it in AA, but I just don't think you can deny what he did to put the power numbers up that he put last year, and then also parlay that into, what is a really low strikeout rate and just great bat to ball skills. These are the kind of guys that I'm looking for if I'm a GM to scoop up. And, he's athletic enough. Like, he's more athletic than Ty France, to be honest. Those are the types of guys I'm looking to try to buy low on because they don't play a premium position and because they don't have this freakish tool. The object of baseball is to hit the baseball, and Dustin Harris is very good at that. And I think those kind of guys get unfortunately overlooked, but I think he's starting to hit his way onto a lot of radars.
Interesting. Well, Aram, since we are on the subject of prospects, we might as well, if we're going to ask a question about a Texas Rangers prospect, we might as well ask about a Tampa Bay Rays prospect or two. And not too long ago, you released the top 10 prospect lists for the Tampa Bay Rays from your perspective on justbaseball.com. And of course, there's the usual names like Shane Baz and Josh Lowe and Vidal Brujan, but I was curious to see you're pretty high on Austin Shenton, number 7, the number 7 prospect in the Rays system. Why is that? Why so high, maybe compared to some other outlets out there?
I thought you were going to ask me about Mead, honestly, but
well, that too. Yeah, we had him on the show as well.
Oh, you had Mead on? I got to listen to that one. I'm a big fan of his.
How dare you? You haven't listened to it yet.
Oh
my gosh.
This is unacceptable. What is happening here?
Because you have not listened to it, my request is that you transcribe our 45-minute interview and post it word for word on justbaseball.com. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I feel like I'm back in detention again in high school. But no, that I'm really excited to watch. But to answer your question first on Shenton, I've had a chance to see this guy all the way back from going into the Cape, where that was kind of the beginning of his breakout. I've even gone all the way back to speaking to his college coach, Mervil Melendez, Mervil Melendez at FIU, Florida International University, where now our advisor at justbaseball.com, Jeff Conine, who co-hosts Outside the Box with Jeff Conine with me, which is a blast talking to him about baseball all the time. But just talking about Shenton, the one thing that really stood out that I keep hearing across the board is just how professional of a hitter he is, how advanced his approach is, and how much of just a gamer he is. And when I watch him more and more, I can just totally see that. I love his swing from the left side. I think it's really going to play all the way through, and we've seen that. We've seen it just continue to play up everywhere he goes. I really think that this is another guy. Again, when I saw Seattle make the trade with Tampa, and before they announced the prospect, I had a conscious thought of, I wonder who the Rays are specifically targeting in this deal. And they specifically targeted Shenton for a reason. And he was someone I had up pretty high in a really loaded Mariners system too. I just look at his ability to play third base. I think he's a solid glove there. I look at his swing. I look at his bat to ball skills. I think there's more power in the tank. I think he's going to hit 25 plus home runs. And when you're getting 275, 360 kind of production with 25 homers from the left-handed side of the batter's box, I love it. His swing reminds me a little bit of Mark Teixeira. It just lives in the zone. He barrels everything. He sprays the ball all over the field. He just is so safe to me. That's why I value him high. Is he going to be a perennial all-star? No. But I have a lot of confidence in his middle outcome potential, which is just a really solid regular who is a nice left-handed bat with some sneaky pop. And that's why I'm a little bit higher on him than the industry. And similar to Mead, too. I mean, before the Arizona Fall League, before he sets the Arizona Fall League hitting streak record, I had Mead all the way up at 56, if I remember correctly. And I had a bunch of people tell me, like, what is that? Like, why do you have that dude at 56 in your top 100? The guy makes hitting look easy.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of similar with those two. And I think the Rays have some really safe prospects to balance out some really high upside guys as well.
Now, rounding that list at number 10 is Tash Bradley, who Neander has said that would be his sneaky pick under the radar. That was at the beginning of the season. I no longer think that he is a sneaky pick, no longer under the radar. Is Tash Bradley right now at his age of 20 years old? Is he more mature in his delivery, in his arsenal, in his pitch efficiency than Shane Baz was at his age?
In terms of throwing strikes, no doubt. Boz is just such a freak athletically, and the stuff that he has. I mean, the slider is just on a different planet. It's like he's like an airbender almost. But when you look at Bradley, I'm just so impressed at his pitchability early on. I don't think not only like comparing it to Boz, comparing it to most guys I see in professional baseball, you just don't see guys with that kind of pitchability that didn't have where they just had a bunch of innings under their belt. He really hit the ground running, and with the fastball, he already has above average command of that pitch. That's why he was able to carve up the lower levels. When you have advanced feel for a fastball that's 94 to 97, and you can spot it up better than most of your peers, you're going to dominate lower level guys, and that's exactly what he did. The slider is above average too, and off the fastball, those pitches work really well. My question for him is, where's that third pitch? The changeup is lagging behind the other two, which is okay, right? We had no 2020 season. The guy is still supremely young and doesn't have that many innings under his belt. But that's the only thing that was holding him back from being even higher up, from being that top 100 prospect is I need to see a little bit more out of the third offering before I fully commit to him being a top 100 guy. But I really do like what we've seen from him. And I think he's got that advanced feel to pitch that you just can't teach guys that young. And a lot of that comes from his athleticism. So I am really excited about him.
Yeah, a couple other questions on your top 10 list for the Rays. Jonathan Aranda, I believe, pops in at number 8. And he's a guy that, look, we talk so much about Wander and Josh Lowe and Vidal Brujan and Shane Baz, but he seems to be a guy, Aranda that has quietly established himself and proved himself to the point that the Rays added him to the 40-man roster. What do you see as far as his potential and outlook as being a major leaguer?
I mean, another guy that's kind of in that same bucket of just why are we not giving him more attention? He has done nothing but flat out hit. There's nothing but hit since he's been out here. And for whatever reason, he's just not getting the time of day, I think, from people outside of the Rays circles that he deserves. The big question was always like, okay, how much power does this guy have? How much power is he going to hit for? I think he showed to the pull side, he's got above average pop. It wasn't that way earlier on. He really got into his lower half a bit more. He's strengthened up a bit more. And I mean, this guy was putting up exit velocities in 108 miles an hour, 109 miles an hour on home runs, which is above average. So you compare that with the fact that, or pair that with the fact that he has a really, really good feel to hit and a super smooth, repeatable swing from the left side. I mean, what is there not to like about this guy? Is he a little bit limited defensively at second base? Probably. And that's probably one of the things that's holding him back. But to me, he's a big league piece. And I think the Rays agree, like you said, adding him to the 40-man roster. He legitimately is a big league piece that I think is going to be a really, really solid, safe, and consistent hitter at the big league level. I think he's capable there too. Similar to Meade, just has the bat to ball skills, and now we're seeing that power start to creep in more. I'm really excited about those types of guys. I always like the guys that have the hit tool first, and then the power starts creeping in. Those guys have the highest interval for success, I think, in terms of achieving something close to what their potential is.
Shameless plug here, but in addition to having Curtis Meade on the podcast, we also once had Blake Hunt on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
Now, Blake is not on your top 10 list, and I know he slid offensively this past season and wasn't added to the Rays 40-man roster, but how far away and what does he need to do to etch himself back into that top 10, top dozen or so prospects or honorable mentions, whatever it may be?
And before you answer that, I also wanted to add this on here at the back. Is he going to get picked in the Rule 5 draft? Do you see him as a possibility?
So I'll start with why he slid off a little bit, and that'll kind of tie into whether I think he'll get picked or not. The offensive side of things, I really like his power potential, but I was very, very surprised when I really dug into the video to see some of those shortcomings offensively, to seeing how much he was getting blown up by Velo and how much he was pulling off of some breaking balls. It looked like he was trying to catch everything out in front, and it looked like he just felt he was overmatched. Put simply, when he got the bump up, He was simply overmatched. And that was a little bit concerning because it wasn't just a guy struggling. It was a guy struggling to compete. And that was the scary thing offensively. Defensively, I love him, and that's why I think at the very least, he's a guy that will run into baseballs. He's got power, I think he's got above average to plus power. And he's a great defender who calls a great game, who you guys can attest to is, smart player behind the dish, has a great makeup. But he needs to make some tweaks with his swing in terms of just shortening things up, making it more simple. And even if he's a below average hitter, that glove and the value he provides behind the dish is really going to, at least at the very least, give you a backup catcher who can run into baseballs, which isn't the worst thing in the world. If it clicks offensively, then we're looking at a really, really interesting prospect that could be in the top 100. I think the reason why the Rays were okay without protecting him is how much he got dominated when he got called up and how much he got blown up by fastballs and blown up by velo. I think if a team really wants to roll the dice, they could do it. But if he's getting blown up after a promotion in the minor leagues to not even to AAA, right? He's just getting promoted to the middle levels of the minor leagues. I don't see a team rolling the dice like that. It's just too much of a risk, in my opinion. Even if he is a phenomenal defender, at this point, you got to put him in the big leagues. I don't think that he would even, be able to remotely battle up there, and it just wouldn't be fair to him either. I don't think he gets picked. I don't think it's impossible. But it's really rare to see catchers get picked in the Rule 5 just because of the fact that you have to throw them right into the fire, and those guys are usually late bloomers offensively. I think Hunt can figure it out, right? I think he's the prime candidate to have been affected by the no 2020 season, and I think he could easily figure it out. But he does have a lot of adjusting to do at the plate, but the potential is still there.
I want to say this because it happened on the Curtis Mead interview. He's not even a pitcher, Curtis Mead. And when we asked him to highlight some of his peers besides Greg Jones, he did, which everybody has said Greg Jones. Everybody, right? He also pointed out Blake Hunt's work defensively. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's so good. All his teammates have really just taken a notice on his work defensively.
Aram, not to nitpick here and squabble over little things on your top 10 prospects list, but why, and I'm not disagreeing with this, but I'm just curious, why Xavier Edwards slightly ahead of Greg Jones? Edwards ranked number 5, Greg Jones ranked number 6, if I recall.
Yeah, so no, it's a great question because I love Greg Jones. Really, for me, it just came down to the floor. I think the ceiling is so much further ahead when you look at what Greg Jones can do if it all clicks. But another guy who got blown up a little bit once he got promoted to AA, I had a really good conversation with him though about it and the adjustments he's looking to make at the plate to be able to accommodate the upper level competition. But with Xavier Edwards, you know what you're getting, right? Like he's a guy that will guaranteed be a big leaguer, that will guaranteed be able to play all over the diamond, will put the bat on the ball, switch hitter. I think you have to put some stock into that as a plus runner who can play all over the diamond as a switch hitter and has a plus hit tool. Yes, he has no power whatsoever, but there's something to be said about the guy that's a guaranteed big leaguer. Whereas if it doesn't work out for Greg Jones, he's not a big leaguer, period. And that's what's really ended up putting him over the top for me. But the thing about Jones is, I mean, his upside is just tantalizing, right? I mean, we're talking about a guy that could be 30-30 if it all clicked, but he's got a lot to figure out. And I think the age played a little bit of a part into it too. Where he's at relative to his age. I'm not saying it's doomsday, but it's something that kind of gave Edwards that edge, is that Edwards has the experience, a little bit more of the track record, and still has the age on his side, whereas Jones, is working against his age now after struggling in AA. The swing and miss is concerning. I want to see a little bit more bat to ball in that department, and I'm going to take the plus runner who's a guaranteed big leaguer at this point with the slight edge, but while acknowledging that the upside isn't even close.
Great answer there, Aram. Great answer. Ulises, we don't want to keep Aram on forever here, but I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, the lockout in CBA. What's your best guess on how this thing shakes out? when the lockout ends and when MLB is playing baseball again, when things are back up and running.
Yeah, so that it's a really interesting thing that, I get questions on this from people who are not involved with baseball. When people ask what I do, and I'm like, oh yeah, I started a baseball media company heading into a strike. People are like, well, is there going to be a season? And everybody I've talked to, whether, especially former players, Jeff Conine, one, for example, that we've talked about this on the podcast. And, Jeff had his 94 season disrupted in the middle of the best season of his career. He was an all-star. He was just having an insane season. And of course they cut it short. That is something that he says was a lot different than what's going on now. He really feels strongly that they're going to find a way to put the season together and make it happen. And I feel exactly the same way. I've talked to a few other guys that were in the big leagues in 94. And if it weren't for 2020, if it weren't for how much money was lost in 2020, I'd be a lot more concerned. But players lost money with their prorated salaries. Owners lost money, though I think they embellish how much it was. No matter what, we all know they lost money. And no matter what the issues are and the disagreements are, these are millionaires and billionaires who want more money, as we all would. And they both stand to lose here. And they already lost in 2020 for things that were out of their control. So I think they're going to find a way. I think it's going to be frustrating. And I think there's going to be a lot of posturing until we get to the 11th hour. And that's the frustrating part about all of it, when you hear these 7-minute meetings and you hear all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to find a way to settle into something, and we're going to have a season. Might be a little bit delayed in terms of spring training and getting into everything, but I feel like it's almost like a game of chicken. Like who's gonna blink first when they both know that neither wants to actually impact the season whatsoever. So I think there's gonna be a meeting in the middle at some point. But yeah, it is just embarrassing, kind of how public and how juvenile some of these negotiations are, which I think kind of gives people a little bit of reason to be pessimistic. But at the end of the day, money talks, and that's what everybody's priority is here.
Okay, so I got a little rapid fire on the lockout. Question number 1, will games be lost?
Don't think so.
Okay. Date of when this will all blow over. When they sit down, sign the papers, and they say, okay, baseball's on again.
Literally the last day possible. Like I think it's going to get to the point where it's like, if they don't get a deal done by this week, then the season will be delayed, and they're going to push it a few days past that, and then they're going to rush everything back in. And this is the thing too, is that a very underrated aspect of it, and a big reason why I get things done on time, is that a couple current big leaguers that I've spoken to were saying to me, a big reason why we had so many injuries this year is that we were not able to get ready at the right time going into the season, because going into 2020 especially, they didn't know when spring training was going to be, because yes, COVID, but also we had this little mini lockout there too. And they didn't know when spring training was going to start. They didn't know when things were going to happen. And a lot of it was soft tissue injuries. A lot of it was things that every player, they've been doing this for so long, whether they're young in the big leagues or not, they have a whole system of when they get started, when they ramp it up, and when they get ready, and their body is used to that. And I think the players are very aware of that, and they want to know when they're getting started, and they want to be able to plan that out. And I think owners, they saw what happened. I mean, the injuries were rampant, and I think they want to be able to, not lose money on their investments. I know they're humans, and it's dehumanizing, but it's their investments, and they don't want to hurt their investments either. So I think that's going to be another catalyst in it, and that's another reason why I think we're going to start on time. But maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic.
No, that's okay. I can vibe with this. Last one on the lockout. If you have to pick one, I know you're going to have to be the bad guy here, but you have to pick one. Okay, I'm giving you options here. Number 1, what would you wave your wand to fix on the CBA? Number 1, minimum wage increase. Number 2, reduce team control years. Number 3, universal DH. Or number 4, pace of game.
So pace of game to me, I think is ridiculous. Look, I'm okay with moving certain things that have no impact on the baseball game, but I think cutting the game down by 3 minutes to appeal to this fan that doesn't exist, that says if games were 2 hours and 58 minutes instead of 3 hours and 7 minutes or whatever it may be, then I'll watch. Like, I don't think that's a thing as much. I think when it gets brutally slow, then that's a factor of it. Mm-hmm. Universal DH I lean towards just because I think that's something that should just absolutely happen, and it's a joke that it's not. I think the easiest fix, because team control, I really would like to see it be cut down, but there's some repercussions on the other side of that too. Like, it's a very nuanced issue that it's not just as simple as, cut down team control and all is good. Like, there's some interesting aspects to it. I think the easiest thing is paying the minimum for players, raising the minimum, right? Because even if they're under control for more years or whatever it is, and that isn't fixed just yet, this is something that's so simple, right? Pay the guys more when they get into the big league. So even though they're under control, they may have to deal with arbitration down the line, at least their baseline salary is better. And that's a drop in the bucket for these teams. But, when you're up and down and when you don't know if you're going to, get to arbitration, having a baseline salary being a little bit higher, I think, is the easiest short-term solution to at least getting these guys a bit more financial stability right out of the gate. Because a lot of these guys are up and down and they don't know. And they might not even make it to arbitration. So I would love to see the minimum salary for baseball players be jacked up a little bit. And I think that's an easy fix for everybody, because what is a couple $100,000 for players, for these owners? It's really nothing, and it can make a big difference for the lives of some of these guys that are quadruple A guys that might be able to hang around for a year or 2 years. I mean, that makes a substantial difference. And not everyone's like, oh, they're athletes. Yeah, like, it is what it is. Like, they can deal with it, but they're making pennies in the minor leagues, and if they get that chance to break into the big leagues and they can hang around, you hang around for 2 years with a salary bumped up a little bit. And that can be something that you can build your life around. Right now, it goes pretty quickly, and I think it's too low relative to the rest of the league. There really is a wide discrepancy in the lower paid guys and the upper paid guys, and there's also a dwindling, just very ironic when we talk about how that might be able to compare it to the world in general too. But it's happening in baseball too. It's kind of a microcosm of what we see.
In addendum to Ulises' question, because Ulises did not mention this in his question there, expanded playoffs. Do you want to see that in the next CBA? Yes or no?
God, that is such a good question. I have not formally made a strong opinion on this, because part of me loves how hard it is to make the playoffs. Like, I think it's so cool. Through my childhood, I was deprived of postseason baseball. And even just sniffing close to playing relevant baseball in September was the most exciting thing ever for me as growing up a Marlins fan. I don't really remember 2003 that great. It's very vague. And then they didn't finish over 500 after 2009 and on. So I do think that it's good for the game, though. So my final answer would be expanded playoffs, because you have just too many teams that are kind of sitting in the purgatory, that aren't encouraged to go for it, you look at the Reds. They keep just kind of sitting in the middle. Maybe if they have an extra team or two making the postseason, they'll be a little bit more encouraged to go for it. The Guardians just, had a new investor and somebody just bought in. I'm forgetting the name, but they got a little bit more money behind them. But the Guardians are a team that, and they won 80 games last year, and everyone's already trading Jose Ramirez in the trade machine and firing up where he's going to go. Expanded playoffs may encourage some of those middling teams to spend more, to do a bit more, and create more of a competitive environment. And in turn, when those teams are making the playoffs, locals care a little bit more. And that could be what kind of reels fans in. So ultimately, I think it's good for the game. It's more money for all parties involved, and it's more playoff games. I like the challenge of getting into the playoffs. Basketball, NBA is expanded it an egregious amount, and they're never going to get to that point. I think like more than half the teams in the NBA make the playoffs. It might be close to that, but it's still not going to be quite that ridiculous. I think as long as they keep it, within reason, I'm here for it.
See, Ulises, we got Aram on board and Kevin Goldstein on board. Ulises is not a big fan of the expanded playoffs, while I in turn am.
Well, the Rays win 90 games every year, so I get it.
Well, the thing is, though, I'm okay with it. Well, first of all, I'm not okay with it. But if we have to go through expanded playoffs, you have to give something more to division winners. You have to give something even more to the best record in the league. I mean, then why are you playing 162 games if everybody and their mother and their grandmother and their step grandpa is also coming into the to the playoffs? Like, it's just the truck's getting heavy, folks.
I agree with that. And I think it's nuanced, right? Like you have to find that balance. I'd be open to even cutting down the regular season a little bit to expand the playoffs, and then also, rewarding those teams that win the division, like you said, a bit more. I don't know if we need a full 162. We need more than 60, which I think we learned because of how janky that season was. But 130 in expanded playoffs, more money, I think more interest. I'm not opposed to it. And sometimes I'm a purist guy in a lot of ways, but I think sometimes you got to look at the big picture and growing the game that we love and trying to welcome more people in. I do think that that's a way to do it. And, I'm willing to give a little bit there in some ways. So that's one that, I'm more open to, but I absolutely hear you, Ulises, totally.
Look, if MLB makes me commissioner, 120 game season, 7-inning games, 14 to 16 team playoff. I'll just leave it at that. Aram is probably about to vomit right now, honestly. So we'll move on from that. Final question, Aram. I'm not even going to let you answer that. I'm not going to even elicit a response there.
He'll send me a DM. He'll send me a DM later.
Yeah. I'm sure he will. Some interesting memes forthcoming. But Aram, and you might eventually get a Hall of Fame vote. Who knows if you become a member of the BBWAA in time? But
it's a dream.
The 2022 ballot. If you had a vote, if you had that power, who would you be voting for this year?
Yeah, I talk about another freaking nuanced conversation here, right? I'm bringing up Jeff again because this is something we've talked about a lot on the podcast with Jeff Conine, and he played against a lot of these guys, and he's like, yeah, of course, they're incredible players. A lot of the guys that were implicated with PEDs, but as a guy that played clean for 18 years, he's obviously going to be like, nah, like the PED guys don't deserve to get in, whatever. There's guys currently in the hall that have taken PEDs. Like, I think that's pretty much an objective fact, and I just want to move past it in a lot of ways. And I think this is like the most loaded PED ballot there is. And that's the challenge. I miss just the classic debate. I had a chance to bring on Jason Stark on Outside the Box with Jeff Conine, and we were talking about it. And I miss talking about just like Jeff Kent and Andrew Jones and guys like, just are they based on baseball merit Hall of Famers or not? But rant aside, I might get a little bit of backlash for it, but I think people are starting to warm up to the idea of it. I think you just got to vote in these guys that dominated the game, even if they took PEDs. I mean, what Bonds did is just so outrageous. You just can't even. We will never see anything like that. What we saw from Roger Clemens, it's just otherworldly. So I'm going to go Bonds, Clemens, and this is just in the order of what these guys got in 2021 or 2020. Excuse me, because I wanted to just kind of go by that order. Schilling's the only guy I'm leaving off because he's begging people to leave him off. So why don't we give him what he wants and leave him off? But Bonds, Clemens, Rolen is in for me too. I really think Rolen's a Hall of Famer. There's nobody in baseball history with as many Gold Gloves at third base that didn't make the Hall of Fame, and it's not like he was a slouch at the plate too. 855 career OPS, 300 home runs. Rolen's in for me. Billy Wagner, it's tough with closers. I'm putting him in. Todd Helton, I'm over the Coors thing. The guy just flat out hit. I don't care. So he's into Sheffield. I think people really undervalue how dominant this guy was. His 1998 season is one of the best seasons we've seen in 20 plus years. Or, oh my gosh, that's more than 20 years ago now, right? No, I can't do math. Whatever. It is one of the craziest seasons we've seen in decades. He's in. Andrew Jones fell off in the back half, but he's in for me too. Nobody dominated the game like that for that stretch defensively and offensively. Unbelievable. My little bit more controversial one is I'm leaving Jeff Kent off. I'm just not – I don't know if he's quite there, and we only get 10 votes on the ballot, and I lean more Bobby Abreu on this ballot. I really think that Bobby Abreu is not getting enough love. Bobby Abreu in the WAR department is up there with a lot of guys. The thing that stands out to me the most is when you look at what he did, 2,470 hits, 395 career on base percentage, which is crazy. But if you look at a list of players who hit 250 or more home runs and stole 400 or more bases, the list is very short. It is Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonds, Craig Biggio, and Bobby Abreu. And, when you consider that, I mean, and those are, Bobby Bonds would have been a Hall of Famer if his career wasn't cut short. Biggio's a Hall of Famer. Barry is, on paper, the best player of all time. I don't know how Bobby Abreu isn't getting more love, not to mention a plus defender or an above-average defender in right field. So that's another guy that's getting it for me. What does that put me at? 8 votes?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 votes. Yes.
8 votes. So this is where I have to, unfortunately go with another steroid guy in Sammy Sosa. But, I mean, he's just too good. And I'm going to lean Sosa on his final year of the ballot over Manny Ramirez on his 6th year on the ballot when he got – I think there's a difference between testing positive and testing positive 3 times. And I know his little short extent, not a very extensive career with the Rays, which I was excited about, but that was cut short because he just couldn't stop taking steroids. If I only have 10 slots, I'm leaving him off on this one. And, A-Rod's kind of in that same boat if I have to, but I'm going to lean A-Rod probably if I have no other space, or if I have more space. And I think I have one more vote. So that would be A-Rod as well, right? Am I missing anybody that's on this year's ballot?
I think, Ulises is happy that you're voting for Bobby Abreu. Some of our listeners are probably happy that you're voting for Tampa area product Gary Sheffield, but Omar Vizquel is not on Aram's ballot for this year. And would you ever put him on, or is he done?
Look, I was very, very, very on the fence about him prior to everything off the field. I mean, I know he's a defensive wizard, but a 688 career OPS. I know the game has changed since then. I know that there wasn't as much priority on slugging and a lot of those things, but I mean, I just can't. I can't really palate putting a guy like that in there offensively. And when he was right on the brink, and then he put in, a lot of the other things that he's been, accused of, and that have a lot of merit behind it in terms of what he, has gotten into off the field. I think that kind of makes it easier for me in terms of making that decision on a guy that was controversial in terms of his ballot before that. And I think that's why we're seeing him free fall quite a bit. I think he's already lost 10 votes so far, which I think kind of speaks to how on the fence he was and how this kind of pushed him on the other side of it.
I mean, honestly, you've seen the drop off already happen. And I think we're going to see maybe the candidate with the most percentage ever have the biggest drop off. I mean, because of the percentages that he was getting, it seemed that he was on the trajectory of getting in maybe in the 8th year or 7th year, but the drop off has been, kind of steep.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Before I would go A-Rod, I'd go Ortiz, because even though he's implicated, again, it's the same logic with Manny. If I'm running out of ballot spots, I'll probably vote for A-Rod and I'll vote for Manny. But I do think that there's a difference if we're running out of ballot spots. The guys that were repeat offenders versus the guys that were implicated. Ortiz was implicated, but not a 2 to 3 time offender with the largest suspension in Major League Baseball history. I think there's a little bit of a difference there. So Ortiz would be in for me to round it out.
Very good stuff, Aram. We kept you on for so long. It'll be the Aram Leighton podcast on Locked On Rays for pretty much the next week. JustBaseball.com. Anything special you have going on there over the next couple weeks, and anything else you want to promote?
Yeah, so continuing to churn out the top prospects for every system. We'll update the Rays probably at some point during the minor league season, which we know we'll get no matter what. That's the fun thing. But also putting out some exciting things on. We're doing off-season outlooks and what teams could be doing on the other side of the lockout. Rays will be included in that, and then also some top 20 pitcher stuff, a lot of ranking stuff and fun evergreen content while we try to keep baseball alive during this dead lockout time. But also a lot of fun conversation on the Just Baseball show as well. I've been really excited to see the growth on that podcast, and a lot of fun things there too. So just come on into the entire Just Baseball network over there. We're excited about what we're building, and I appreciate you guys having me on and asking me about it, because it's always a blast talking to you guys, and really excited to see what's next year, and maybe return the favor, and would love to have you guys on one of our shows moving forward as well.
Likewise, Final question. Jeff Conine's career WAR. Do you know what it is off the top of your head?
Ooh, name that WAR? Ooh,
Yeah.
let's do this.
So Jeff hates war. He hates war because
He's a pacifist.
War hates him a little bit. I think it's like 18.8. 23.8.
Yeah, depending. I guess you're going with Fangraphs on BREF. It's 19.5.
Okay.
Damn, I was close.
You were really close. You know,
close.
we'll have to have another name that war with Aram next time.
I'm in. Yeah, Jeff hates war. We've gone back and forth on this one and a couple of times on the podcast. He's like, Ryan Howard hit 50 home runs and he was only a 2 WAR guy. Like, what do you mean 2 wins and whatever? It's so funny. So I get the holes you can poke in it. But I think Jeff hates it because I think he feels like he's more deserving than 18 to 20 WAR. But hell, man, that's still some impressive stuff.
Yes, it is.
Now,
yes, it is.
If his son puts up like a 50 WAR or something like that when his career is over, then I don't want him coming back and squawking and say, oh, you know what, WAR's okay. You know, maybe it is a little bit of a better metric now.
I totally would see that happening too, because he's the first to tell you that he thinks Griffin's more talented than he ever was.
He should be fun to watch.
Very good. All right, I'm going to end the recording here. Great stuff.